Bendy in the Dark revival is out, and it seemingly helps us to piece together even more of the mysteries of Joey Drew Studios and its ink machine. But at the same time, it also leaves us with more questions too. Welcome back, my fellow gamers. It's me, Amanda. What cartoon characters do you think would be the most frightening if they suddenly sprang to life? Number 10. Wilson was jealous of Joey Drew. Perhaps the reason why Wilson set this all in motion was because he was jealous of how much admiration his father, Nathan Arch, had for Joey in comparison to him. Wilson evidently felt like he could not live up to his father's expectations, and that he himself had been robbed of inheriting a legacy, and as such decided to take it out on Archtop and the legacy of Joey Drew by taking control of the ink machine and the cycle. It seems that Wilson has his own plan for what should be happening with the animation studio and in the cycle, and he tends to put it into motion all on his own. There's also of course the fact that I don't think Wilson ever wanted his dad to do an animation studio. He wanted his dad to do live action movies. This seems to be Wilson's way of taking control of a life and a business that in the real world he felt he had very little control over. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. Who is at the door? Right off the bat at the beginning of the game, you hear a banging at the door as you see what appears to be a dilapidated and abandoned studio office. Could it be someone from the cast of Joey Drew Studios? Bendy? Alice Angel? Or is it possible that really it is the true form of Audrey, waiting to declare herself? Our protagonist for the game, Bendy in the Dark Revival. We don't know much about Audrey going into the game, though you learn a lot more about her through playing as her in the highly anticipated sequel. Audrey was not a character seemingly present in Bendy and the Ink Machine, but through playing the game you realize that there's a lot more to this hardworking illustrator and animator who works at Archgate Films. Or is it possible that Audrey's secrets are meant to be the one banging at the door? A secret that has seemingly been kept even from herself. Throughout the opening sequence we also hear a demonic yet feminine voice speaking that says, "We're always free to choose, to believe what we want to believe, but when you step back, when you really look at where you've been and the things you've done, your past will come to devour you." Seemingly this passage could be in reference to Audrey's story, or possibly in reference to Joey Drew's. Number 8. Don't eat too much. For some reason this seems to be something that we are warned about early on by Allison Angel. Meets us as Audrey in Dark Revival after we've been attacked by a piper. The game will instruct you to regain health through eating, and we find a can of bacon soup and sip on that, feeling much better and regaining health. It's then that Allison shows up to warn us about drinking too much soup. She says that although it will make you feel better, it has a bad aftertaste. Now, could she be implying that the bacon soup is somehow something that could corrupt you, and that perhaps in drinking too much of it, more creations in the cycle were twisted into something else darker? Number 7. Takes place at a time when funding is running out. The game takes place at a time when funds seem to be beginning to run out for Archgate Films. It's suspected that buying up the Joey Drew IP could have been a last-ditch effort to actually save Archgate. Why do I theorize that Archgate isn't doing as well here? Well, I mean, just look at the state of the offices and the studio. Wilson also mentioned how power shortages have been happening frequently, and Audrey seems to be the only one motivated to work late, and the only one working on possibly the animation of Bendy in what appears to be a short film. Also doing 800 frames in a night, that sounds like a lot of frames to be drawing, especially considering more modern animators typically churn out a lot less in a day, closer to I believe 140 frames, and that's without needing to hand draw all of that. All of this could point to massive layoffs and general hemorrhaging of money. Number 6. Nathan did help Joey. This theory comes from the shrine that you see in the basement of Archgate Films. It seems interesting that they have a shrine to Joey Drew down there, and it makes me think that despite the fact that Joey did fail where Nathan ultimately ended up succeeding, Nathan still respected Joey and his dream in the end. With how much Archgate honors Joey and seems to earnestly want to carry on his legacy, it seems likely that Nathan did offer to help Joey when he asked him, although this help could have come too late. Number 5. Nathan didn't help Joey. I know this seems like a confusing point to have, considering I made a counterpoint just a moment ago, but this one comes from the fact that we learn after entering the cycle that Joey Drew Studios was repossessed. Now, we find a note on the table upon climbing up the ladder that seems to be from someone in charge of repossessing the building in the studio that they were in, and their equipment. It reads, "Geez, the way these people are looking at me. I've never seen such disappointment in a person's eyes." But this is the way of things. If management can't pay their bills, then the bank takes the goodies back. Still, it does break me me a bit, knowing how much I loved them old cartoons this place used to make. Oh well, times change, life moves on. The note is signed by Telly Wester. Number 4. The Truth. While Wilson claims to have defeated the Ink Demon and rule the cycle, we soon realize in the beginning of the game that this just isn't true. It's first made apparent when Allison Angel warns us as Audrey to watch out for the Ink Demon, implying that even though Wilson claims to have killed and defeated this creature, it still lives on within the cycle. The Ink Demon seems to also want to rule, but it is competing with Wilson at this point. Despite Wilson condemning the demon and the Ink Demon condemning Wilson, it seems as though these two characters actually share more in common than they would let on. Perhaps in some way they are both alike in the sense that they feel their fathers failed them, or their creators. And in a similar vein, although they both seem to want Audrey dead, it's possible all three of the characters have actually more in common than any of them would ever be willing to admit. Number 3. Audrey isn't real. And an interesting theory I've been wondering about ever since learning of this game's ending is if Audrey is even real at all. Without giving too much away in terms of spoilers, I'm wondering if perhaps the fact that her co-workers locked her in the studio was perhaps supposed to be a little hint to us, and perhaps that was supposed to mean something, if it meant anything. In my theory, the thought process is that perhaps her existence is purely fictional, and on the night when everything goes sideways for Audrey, her co-workers begin to forget about her existence as a result of the fact that she isn't a real flesh and blood human, but something else entirely in origin. This could also have to do with the ink machine's arrival at Archgate. If this is true, perhaps that is why she was locked in the studio. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was that she simply isn't real and people couldn't think of her because to them, she no longer existed. Number 2. Deal with the devil. Gen Corporation is exceedingly mysterious, even in Bendy and the Dark Revival. What do we know about them? We know they are a corporation who helped to make a lot of inventions that Joey Drew Studios both used and advertised, but why were they even partnered with Joey Drew Studios? What did they get out of that deal? And what did Joey Drew Studios get? Possibly additional funding or equipment in exchange for advertising, but also, is it possible that their pact ran even deeper? Perhaps Joey Drew made a deal with Didnt to use his studios for their experiments, not just including the premise as a place to test, but also as employees, as people who could be tested on. Hence the creation of the ink machine and its cult and everything that maybe happened thereafter. Number 1. Save the studio. Spinning out of our last theory, this one has to do with one about the studio's fate. When things got really tough, perhaps Joey Drew made a deal with Didnt to find a way to preserve the studio and perhaps a part of his life force no matter what happened. Hence the creation of the cycle. After all, within the cycle, the studio still does exist, although it doesn't work in the same way as the studio once did. It's not really a studio, it's kind of a nightmare realm. It's all right there, right down to the little devil lounge. Is it possible that this was no accident, but all part of Joey Drew's plan to save the studio at any cost? Was it his determination to save the studio and create the family he'd always wanted that condemned the studio to become doomed in the end? That's all the time we have for this video. Have you played the Dark Revival yet? And if so, what are you thinking of it so far? Or did you finish it? What do you think of it once you're done? Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep on gaming on. Pew pew!